I was able to play Stalker 2 early, and today I get to share my first impressions with you. I've been waiting for this sequel since the very first Stalker, and this is one of my favorite universes. I love the book, I love the philosophy, the ambiance, the lore. It's an incredible world, and the sequel renders out the exclusion zone with a fidelity that brings the mystery and horrors of the zone to life in a way that I had only ever dreamed of. Now, I was given a key by the devs to play early, and they requested that I didn't show past certain events in the game to avoid spoilers, but truthfully, I didn't even make it that far, as I only got this key days before this NDA was up, and frankly, I didn't want to torture myself rushing through this campaign for the first time. I wanted to take my time and enjoy it and do the side quests. The game is supposed to be about 35 to 40 hours of main mission content, with tons more available in the side quests, so there just simply wasn't any way for me to get a full review of this game ready. So I'll reiterate that today's video is a first impression of the game. And the too long didn't read version of this impression is that Stalker 2 is one of the most beautifully intoxicating games I've played. It has incredible graphics, and the meticulous world crafting makes everything feel rich and interesting, no matter if you're creeping through a rat-infested sewer system or a beautiful red poppy field that seems to have a mind of its own. The character writing and freedom of choice is incredible, and it makes it feel like this is my adventure and not just a linear playthrough that everybody else is going to experience, but that my version of the game is going to be different than your version. That said, the build I was playing was very buggy, and it was getting patched as I played, so when I first started playing there was no gunshot sounds from first person, but then it got patched later. And I was experiencing everything from basic glitchy animations, lots of sound effects not triggering properly, to entire missions breaking at certain points. It's hard for me to say for sure how many of these bugs will be on the launch day build, but I have a feeling it's not going to be the smoothest experience on day one. The performance was certainly playable, but not amazing, and I fear that the lesser systems may struggle to maintain 60 FPS. But due to the early build nature of this first impression, it's hard for me to properly weigh in on what it's going to be like for everyone else. However, despite these bugs and performance hiccups, it wasn't enough to deter me from falling in love with this game's incredible atmosphere and experience. Let's get into this impressions with what Stalker 2 does incredibly well, and that is the lore and world crafting. If you're completely new to the world of Stalker, it takes place in an alternate history in which the Chernobyl nuclear disaster turned the city of Pripyat and the surrounding area into what is called the Zone. A place in which the laws of our known universe seem to unwind and break down, and the extreme radiation has transformed the wildlife and even people into, well, mutated horrors that will tear you limb from limb or melt your brain with their psi abilities. That is, if you don't die from walking into an anomaly first, and you will die from anomalies. The landscape is littered with these booby traps that are essentially the physical world's rules being crazy, but in small contained areas. Gravitational distortions will suck you in and pulverize you. Electrical disturbances will fry you and catch you on fire. There's emissions where the entire sky turns red, and if you're outside while they happen, actually I don't know what happens. I ran inside. I think you'll die. And one of my new favorite anomalies is the nearly invisible razor-sharp shards that just float in clouds around the map for you to sprint into when you're not paying attention. And let's not forget the poppy field, that's as beautiful as it is deadly. I'll let you discover the secrets of that one on your own. Now, this gameplay environment was actually created by referencing the real area surrounding Chernobyl. The devs put together a documentary talking about the making of the game, and it's quite interesting to see them actually venture into this restricted area, both for the experience and for the references. And the skill and passion behind turning this area of the world into a region for a video game is remarkable. The zone in Stalker 2 feels real. The Unreal Engine 5 visuals are incredible, but also the density of the world is incredible, given just how big it is. At the start of the game, you climb a radio tower and it gives you a view of the surrounding area, and you can just make out the Chernobyl power plant smokestack in the distance. That plant is there, physically located many miles away, and it's a seamless world that you can walk to it, and That is, assuming you can actually walk to it without being killed by the thousands of things along the way that are probably going to try and kill you. And on your journey, you get the sense that the entire world is handcrafted, and at no point do you feel like you're out in a randomly generated field with nothing to do. There's purpose and mystery everywhere. From caves, hidden bunkers, bandit patrols, and unique anomalies teasing you to get closer and see if you can figure out their secrets. The zone is a place of nightmares, but also wonders, which both corporations and people called stalkers have taken an interest in. Stalkers travel through the zone retrieving artifacts to sell to interested parties. These artifacts can provide their owners with reality-changing powers, some of which could fulfill your innermost desires, which is very much a theme of the original book and the original game, which I highly recommend checking out. In-game, you can equip these artifacts, and they can provide you with something as simple as additional resistance to electric damage, or something far more powerful. Frankly, I don't actually know yet. I'm not that far in the game to get some of the super powerful ones, but I'd imagine high-level artifacts can offer you some pretty amazing abilities. Now, the original Stalker is credited with basically popularizing the survival game, scrounging for resources in a dilapidated environment while trying to manage food, ammo, and shelter. Stalker 2 aims to recapture that same essence, though with a number of quality of life upgrades, some of which may not appeal to the more hardcore crowd, but they will certainly make the game more accessible to a larger audience. I started off the game on normal difficulty to try and make as much progress through the game before the NDA was up, and it is possible that some of the things I would critique the game for on normal might not be the same on hard, but I'm not entirely sure what changes between the difficulty levels. But I will say I found it considerably easier to start playing in Stalker 2 compared to the original. Not only does it do a much better job of onboarding you to all the game's mechanics and explaining how things work, but I also found it much easier to acquire my starting gear and resources. I wasn't quite so desperate for every single bullet and every single piece of bread or food that I could find. And while the original game starts off with this incredibly brutal introduction, which starts to get easier as you acquire more and more equipment towards the end of the game, Stalker 2 starts you off easier, but it manages to maintain a high level of difficulty even 10 hours in. Just when you're starting to feel more confident about your loadout and your gear and thinking that you've got a handle on things, a wild pack of mutant dogs comes out of nowhere and tears you apart, reminding you that the zone is truly in control of your destiny. And it was actually quite funny dying in some of the same ways I had in the original Stalker. My very first playthrough the original game, I got mauled by mutant dogs the second I stepped outside of the starting zone, and sure enough in Stalker 2, they recreated the same experience for me. I quickly found myself back in the old habit of hitting that quick save button before entering any sort of area that felt like it could pose a risk. Now, major components of the world building in Stalker 2 are the characters and moral choices you will make along the way. While the overall narrative seems to be somewhat pushing you toward the center of the zone, as I would imagine most players are going to go down that path, the choices you make along the way and characters or factions you align yourself with can greatly affect the world around you. Sure, there's simple things like helping a stalker fish their weapon out of a radioactive puddle and not choosing to keep it for yourself when you could. It might not reward you immediately, but then down the road that character could offer you a quest or assist you in a certain deed. However, I was actually quite surprised to see my choice of eliminating a major gang kingpin just flippantly, because I felt like it, led to an arguably terrible military invasion and takeover that eliminated some of the quest givers I was working with. I immediately felt like I was being taught a moral lesson where it created a power vacuum and now things were even worse than they were before. But also that I had now a new narrative branch that was taking me on new and weird adventures. What quests and experiences had just been cut off from me and which new ones were becoming available? I have a feeling that the replayability of Stalker 2 is going to be immense, just like the first game. Now, I could truly go on and on about the hidden beauty and mystery of the zone, but I will leave that for you to discover on your own. And aside from the bugs and performance, which did occasionally hamper my experience and immersion, there are a few design choices that I'm not really enjoying with Stalker 2. The first one of these is the day-night cycle. Now, mind you, it's possible that I'm overlooking a mechanic that wasn't clear to me, though I did look through all the tutorials to see if there was some way I could better manage when I was playing the game, but I ended up spending a lot of the game walking around the zone at night, and the environment is rendered very dark, turning an otherwise visual feast of one of the most beautiful games I've ever played into a dark and frankly boring game by comparison. Walking down a road for 500 meters at daytime was pretty interesting and full of visual eye candy. I could see areas of interest all around me that might pull me off course and lead me on new adventures. But at night, everything was ugly and boring, and then the night lasts a really long time. You can try and find a bed so that you can sleep and then continue your mission in the morning, but I was unable to control how long I slept, so sometimes I would wake up and it would still be dark out, and the prevalence of beds that you can sleep in seems extremely rare. Like, as far as I can tell at this point, beds are only usable in the main hub areas, which are separated by kilometers of walking. So I spent a significant amount of the game skulking around at night and frankly not enjoying that time. It felt like a chore to run missions at night versus a joy to do them at day. The first game had a lot more beds scattered around the map, and you could easily go to sleep and sort of manage what time of day you wanted to run your missions or return back or find shelter when it was getting dark out. And while playing, I found a lot of beds in Stalker 2 that seemed like they might be intended for me to be able to go to sleep in. Safe areas, secluded areas, and I kind of wonder if that was intended, but maybe the feature didn't get completed or they pulled it for a specific reason at some point. And the duration of the night cycle felt comically long and didn't align with certain sequences. Like there was one sequence where a character is talking to me up at this great vista point on top of a crane, and while his character model was bugging out at the time, he was also talking about how beautiful the landscape was. And it was nighttime, so I couldn't really see much of anything, and it kind of felt like the game really is supposed to be experienced mostly at day, but it's like 50-50. Anyway, that's kind of my biggest design gripe with the game. It seems like they could make some easy fixes like changing the day-night cycle to favor day much more than night and add more beds to it, but that's probably my biggest design gripe. Now, the other more of a nitpick for me is the compass and waypoint system. In the original, very hardcore Stalker, you had your PDA map, very minimal markers and waypoints, so you really had to check your map frequently and plan your route and see where you were in relation to where you needed to be. Stalker 2, however, employs a much more generous compass system, which is clearly aimed at making the game more accessible for a larger audience, but it also kind of makes it feel like a Far Cry game with bright blue and orange markers showing you where to go and even taking you to the exact location of hidden stashes instead of having you search around for it based on a description. Now, you can turn this feature off in the UI settings along with many other things to make it more of a hardcore or immersive experience, but I was kind of hoping that it would be tied into difficulty settings, like playing on hard would turn off all your compass and UI aids, but it doesn't, and I think a lot of players are going to miss out on a more immersive experience and better exploration because they'll opt to play the game with the new training wheels. And I can certainly understand the decision here, wanting more people to play and enjoy the game, but I kind of wish they forced the higher level difficulties to be closer to the original experience rather than just having it be an option in the menu. Now that said, as many of the markers did take you to very specific locations so you didn't have to search around for them, there seemed to be just as many missions where the markers were far less specific and you had to actually do a bunch of problem solving and running around once you got to a location. Getting into a locked room, finding secret passages, all of that stuff is still very much part of the game. Now, of course, I can't go much further with this first impressions because of just the limited time that I've had to actually play the game. I will say that I like Stalker 2 a lot, and I think a lot of other people are going to enjoy it as well. But I also think that the launch is almost certainly going to ship with a healthy dose of bugs and probably a bit of performance issues as well. Still, for for me, this is an easy day one buy, bugs and all. But for others, I could easily see people wanting to wait for a few post-launch patches before diving into this otherwise intoxicating world. I can't wait to play more and explore the rest of the zone and its mysteries. It feels amazing to be back here so many years later. What are your thoughts on Stalker 2 if you've managed to pick it up and play it already? What's your takeaway? What's your performance like? How many bugs are you running into? What's your favorite thing about the game? Is there a secret or a mechanic that I'm missing that'll make things better or more enjoyable? Let me know in the comments. And up next, check out my video on Stalker Anomaly, one of the best ways to play the original Stalker games and absolutely still worth playing today. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.